Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Today is the second part of my video on my Uncle Mike's haunted house. So just a quick recap. My uncle had moved into a new house after being married as a newlywed, and my mother and my aunt, his sisters, with their husbands, went in to help him move. And it was a really hard night for me. I was the only child, and I started to see a man in the room where I was coloring, and he was tormenting me all night, like threatening me as if he was going to hurt the people in the room. The ladies were playing cards, and my uncle went to go get food, and with my other uncle and my stepdad, but didn't come back for quite a few hours. So he was just tormenting me, and it was such a scary experience for me. I never went back and left all my belongings there. So he was a police officer, and his wife was a nurse, and she moved her mom and her dad in just so she wouldn't be by herself, and they just wanted to make sure she was safe. So little things started happening in the house, and my Uncle Mike was getting blamed for them because cop has strange hours sometimes. So sometimes he'd be leaving at 3 a.m, 12 midnight, and if the lights got left on, he was the one that was getting blamed for it. So that's, cabinets would be left open, and immediately he was the blame. Lights would be left on all through the house, and they'd wake up in the morning thinking, well, what's happening? Trash would be left on the floor. Just the whole trash can would be just knocked to the floor, and trash would be scattered across the floor in the mornings. Things like that. Doors left open. So one morning they wake up and the front door was wide open, the sliding door was wide open, and they just blamed it on him. And so when he would get home, he would be told, hey, why were you doing that? So he was hearing this, constantly, and it started to put a strain on the marriage, because he was getting attacked by, not only her, but his mother-in-law, his father-in-law. So it was just something that it was pretty hard for him. So one night I believe he wasn't there yet, and his wife wakes up, and she had no blanket. So what she used to do, she used to sleep with her own blanket, because he was such a wild sleeper. When he would turn around, the blankets would just come off of her. And she had her own blanket, and she was a very petite woman, very small, and no fat on her bones, so she just was super cold. So she wakes up, she has no blanket, and she gets up, she starts to look around, and there's no blanket on. She thought maybe it fell on the floor, but there was nothing on the floor. So she thought that was pretty odd. So she thought, She went into the restroom, her own restroom right there in the master suite, and she sees the blanket folded up nice and neat on the floor. So she was starting to, when you are dealing with a spirit that's, taunting you and playing with you, they want you to think that you're crazy. Everybody always thinks, did I imagine this? Did I get up in my sleep and fold it and put it away? People start questioning their own sanity. And this was what was happening throughout the house. Her mother, her father also were dealing with things on their own. And they were thinking, well, maybe it's just us. Maybe it's the wind. Maybe it was my Uncle Mike. So she woke up and she had no blanket. And one night, my uncle comes home, and he was pretty exhausted. He was pretty tired. And he just lays on the bed on top of the blanket, and he was so tired, he just fell asleep. He doesn't know how long he was asleep when something pulled him off the bed, grabbed him by his feet and pulled him off the bed. That was pretty scary. And he wakes up and he's thinking, was I sleepwalking and I missed the bed? Did I drop myself on the floor instead of dropping myself on the bed? So, there he is questioning himself. So he thought, what is going on? So, he went back to sleep and nothing happened. And that's what a spirit does when they're angry spirits, and they'll taunt with you. They'll taunt with one, and then they'll taunt with another. So he went back to bed and just thought, well, maybe it was just me being so tired. And then it happened to his wife on a separate occasion. And her being so petite, I'm sure she just flew off the bed. And she also was like, what's going on? Did I sleepwalk? How did this happen? And, that was just shocking. So they couldn't blame that on my uncle. So, and I believe he was right next to her when she got pulled off the bed. So he was next to her on the bed, and he wakes up too, like, well, are you okay? And she's like, I just got pulled off the bed. And so he started thinking, well, hey, something's going on here, because I got pulled off the bed the other night. So this was something that was already questionable in their family. They were just kind of like, something's going on. It wasn't until one night he comes home, and they had a little foyer to enter. He had a little wall on one side as you entered, and straight ahead was a sliding door. So he walks in, and the light is on in the kitchen. He can see it as he's coming up, and he thought, well, who's awake? And as he opens the door, he hears a whirring sound, a spinning, like a really fast shoo, 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 shoo. And then he thought, well, what is that? And then he hears snapping, crunching sound. And he turns around the little wall, and he sees the chairs. Now the chairs spun, and they had wheels also at the bottom of them, but they weren't moving on the floor. They were just spinning in place. All 4 chairs were spinning around, and as they would slow down, that was the whirring sound. And as they would slow down, somebody was spinning them faster and faster and faster, each one. And he just stayed fixated. He couldn't blink, he couldn't move. And then he hears a snapping sound again, and he sees that there's bones. He notices the bones, chicken bones, or some bones, on the table. And someone is eating the bones, crunching the bones, and they're snapping in front of his face. They're coming off the table, and they're being snapped. That did it. That did it for him. And he woke everybody up in the house, and he just, couldn't believe what was happening. And he was describing everything to them, and the chairs were slowing down. And they really didn't believe him. They just thought, really, they hadn't seen it. So, like I said, the spirit was waiting and working on just one person, and just trying to drive them slowly crazy, and then working on another person. So individually, each person got their time with the spirit. And he said, that's it. We got to get out of here. We can't do this. And they had already been there a few months, and it was just little things here, little things there. But this one was the last straw. He couldn't do that one. He couldn't do it anymore. So they moved out, and they went to go live with his mom, my grandma. And he was making trips. My mom got together again with him, with their husbands, and they were helping him move. And he wanted to get out of there as quickly as possible. So they only moved during the daytime. They did not wait till once it was evening. They would go home. So it took him a couple of days. But on the last day, he said, I can come back for the rest of the stuff. There was just a few items left in this house, and he said I could come back on my own. And during the day, and he assured everybody everything would be fine. So he went back, and the sun was still out, and he was starting to move some things, and his neighbor did come out. And he didn't talk to his neighbor because he was newlyweds, and he worked odd hours, and that just so happened that the man next door also was a police officer. and he had gone to the academy with him, so they did kind of recognize each other. So he was talking to him, and he said, "Hey, you lasted the longest." And he said, "Well, what do you mean? I don't get it." He said, "Well, the people before you only lasted 2 months in this house." And my uncle said, "Well, you know, what do you mean?" I think it was about a little over 2, almost 3 months, between 2 and 3 months, somewhere that when my uncle lasted. And he said, "Yeah, you know, the other people, they were out of here quick. They were out of here really quick. 2 months was the longest." And me and my wife were placing a bet, like how long you would last. My Uncle Mike was like, "Why didn't you tell me this when I first moved in? You saw me moving in. Why didn't you come tell me that?" So Uncle Mike was pretty upset with him. And so he starts moving, and it starts getting, he thought, "I'm going to go take this load they had to move into an apartment." He's like, I'm going to take this load and I'm going to come back for another load. So when he came back, it was already evening. It was already dusky. It was, people had their lights on in their house. So he was a bit apprehensive, but he thought, well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get my stuff out. He opens the front door, and right across the front door was the living room, and then a big sliding door. It was a big one. It was about, to me, it looked like a 10-footer, but I was a kid, so probably was just a basic size, but he had no curtains on it because they were moving, obviously. And the moon was shining through that window. So you can see a shadow of a man standing straight ahead from the front door. And the man's head was off to the side like this, just standing there, not saying anything, not doing anything. And my uncle said, "That's it. I'm not coming back for this stuff. I'm done. I'm just going to leave it and take a loss." So he turns around and he closes the door and he starts locking it, and he's walking to his car, and he turns around and he looks at the house, and every single light on in the house is flashing on and off, on and off. Front porch, kitchen, bedrooms, everything all at the same time, flashing hysterically. So he said, "Nope, I'm done." And he didn't go back for the rest of those items. And this was, from this point, I do remember that my uncle would see a lot of things after this point. And I'm not sure if it just has to do with age, maybe state of mind, but I never heard stories of him when he was younger and seeing things like this. I heard him after this point. And it turns out later that my uncle did find out that the man in the house was murdered, brutally murdered. I believe he was stabbed, if I remember. It was just a brutal killing. It wasn't something just like a gunshot. It was just a bad murder. And he was murdered in that house. And what I've noticed for myself is when there's a murder or something horrific happens to a person when they pass, the energy in that area is not the same. It will have an area where it's just chaotic and just, bad things can happen from there. And I won't necessarily say it's that person that's haunting it. I feel sometimes that it can just be a portal, just an opening of, where something bad can come through. Bad energy, it can attract something, it can come to that area, whichever way you want to see it, but that's usually what usually happens when someone is killed in a bad way, maybe before their time, things like that, and there's just the energy that's left behind is really bad. So that concludes my story of my uncle's haunted house. I do have more stories. Lots of things have happened that my family's witnessed, I've witnessed. So if you'd like to stick around and hear more stories, please hit the subscribe button and like this video and comment if you can. If you have any stories, I would love to hear them. Please leave them in the comments. or any questions, I definitely would like to answer your questions. And until the next time, thanks guys for joining me. Have a good one. Bye-bye.